My sister's wedding rehearsal dinner was supposed to be the night my family proved they had finally become the kind of people they had always pretended to be. Lakeview Club had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the water, white roses climbing a temporary arch by the glass, gold-rimmed plates at every setting, and a champagne wall that caught the sunset like it had been designed specifically to make ordinary people feel underdressed. My mother had spent months telling anyone who would listen that Brooke deserved a beautiful beginning after everything she had been through, which was my mother's way of describing a first marriage that ended because Brooke got bored and a second engagement to a real estate broker whose parents cared very much about appearances. My father had practiced his toast for days. I knew that because he had always practiced being generous before an audience. And I was seated at the table closest to the kitchen doors, half hidden behind a column where servers slipped in and out carrying trays, because according to my mother, I was comfortable anywhere. Then my father lifted his glass in front of 43 relatives, 2 future in-laws, a photographer, the lake club manager, and half the staff, and said, "My mother's old Steinway helped make this wedding possible. She would have wanted Brooke to have a beautiful beginning." For one breath, the whole room accepted it. My mother pressed a napkin to the corner of her eye. Brooke lowered her lashes like a bride in a magazine. Trevor's parents nodded with careful approval. And I sat there with a green folder under my chair and a brass key in my purse, listening to my father publicly bless my sister's wedding with money he had taken from my dying grandmother. They had sold Grandma Eleanor's 1892 Steinway piano for $95,000, signed a statement claiming they had the right to sell it, and used the proceeds to pay for the parts of Brooke's wedding that made her look rich enough to marry into Trevor's family. They thought Grandma was too sick in hospice to ever find out. They thought I was too weak to tell her. They thought that because I was 52, divorced, and played piano for hospice patients and children in a community center, I would do what I had always done, swallow the insult, protect the mood, and let them rename theft as family. But the document that ruined my father that night was not the trust paper itself. It was not even the pickup receipt from the dealer or the payment trail to Lakeview Club. It was a signature he had forgotten giving my grandmother 5 years earlier, a bold Frank D. Whitaker signature on a family asset acknowledgment stating that he had no right to sell, move, pledge, liquidate, or represent ownership of that piano. When an old man in a charcoal suit stood from a table near the back, opened his legal folder, and said, "Frank, before you tell another room full of people what your mother would have wanted, I think we should discuss the trust asset you sold and the statement you signed claiming you owned it," my father's face changed in a way I had waited my whole life to see. Not guilt. Not yet. First came irritation, because men like my father experience correction as disrespect. Then came calculation, because every room was a game board to him. Then came the slow white panic of a man realizing the board had been set before he entered. My mother whispered my name like a warning. Brooke set her champagne glass down so hard the stem snapped. And I stayed seated near the kitchen door with my hands folded around my napkin, because for once, I did not have to beg anyone to believe me. The papers were about to speak louder than I ever could. But to understand why I let him finish that toast, and why I did not interrupt before he tied my sister's wedding to my grandmother's stolen piano in front of everyone he wanted to impress, I need to take you back to the Tuesday afternoon my mother called and told me Grandma Eleanor had been moved into hospice. I was in the music room at St. Bartholomew Community Center when the call came, sitting beside a retired mail carrier named Mr. Donnelly while he fought his way through the first page of Moon River for the 8th week in a row. The room smelled like floor wax, old hymnals, and the lemon oil I rubbed into the scarred upright piano every Friday whether it needed it or not. Mr. Donnelly had arthritis in 3 fingers and no natural sense of rhythm, but every time he made it through 8 measures without stopping, he smiled like he had crossed a finish line, and I had learned not to underestimate victories that looked small from the outside. My phone buzzed on top of the piano beside a stack of beginner books, and my mother's name lit the screen. Linda Whitaker did not call me during work unless she needed something, wanted to correct something, or had found a way to make something my fault before I knew it had happened. I answered anyway. "Claire," she said, no greeting, no softening. "Your grandmother had another episode. They're moving her to hospice this afternoon." My left hand was resting on middle C. The note sounded under my palm, dull and wrong, as if the instrument itself had flinched. "Is she conscious?" I asked. "She's tired. Don't start getting dramatic. In my family, asking for medical details was dramatic when I did it. When Brooke asked, it was devotion. My mother continued, your father and I are meeting with the hospice coordinator at 4. Brooke has her final venue walkthrough at Lakeview, so she can't be there. You should come. You're good with those sad places. Those sad places. She meant hospitals, nursing homes, hospice rooms, all the places where families speak softly around machines and pretend the people who show up at the end were present the whole time. I had played piano in hospice common rooms for 16 years because Grandma Eleanor once told me music was the last language the body remembered. I had sat beside dying strangers while their families cried, argued, prayed, checked emails, or asked nurses whether insurance covered an extra day. I had learned how to be quiet without disappearing. My mother heard all of that and called it, good with sad places. I'll be there, I said. Of course you will, she replied, as if I had confirmed I would bring folding chairs to a church supper. And Claire, don't bring your little keyboard or anything. Your grandmother needs rest, not a concert. The line clicked before I could answer. Mr. Donnelly looked at me from the bench, his hands still hovering over the keys, embarrassed to have overheard another person's family being careless with her heart. Go, he said. We can try again next week. I smiled because he needed me to, but I already knew the week had changed shape. By the time I arrived at Mercy Hospice, my father was in the hallway outside Grandma's room with his arms crossed, speaking to the coordinator like he was negotiating a disputed insurance claim. Frank Whitaker had sold policies for nearly 40 years and called it protecting families. He had the warm public voice, the firm private voice, and the wounded voice he used when someone expected him to sacrifice anything measurable. My mother stood beside him in beige slacks and pearls, clutching a folder full of brochures she would never read. Brooke was not there, because apparently linen samples and lakefront seating charts outranked the woman who had taught us both to read music. Good, you're here, my father said. They said someone should visit daily. Your mother and I can't be here every day. Brooke is under a lot of wedding stress. You're the obvious choice. He did not ask whether I could. He did not ask whether it would hurt to spend every afternoon watching the woman who raised me disappear by inches. In my father's mind, my availability was a family utility, like electricity or an extra set of keys. I teach 4 afternoons a week and volunteer Thursdays, I said, not because I believed it would matter, but because some stubborn part of me still recorded facts even when no one valued them. My mother sighed. Claire, you play piano for old people and children. Don't make it sound like surgery. I felt the old heat rise in my throat, the one that had been with me since 17, when my parents skipped my recital for Brooke's cheer banquet and told me performance was nice, but school spirit mattered to the whole family. I swallowed it because Grandma's door was 3 feet away and I had learned that my anger could be used as evidence against me before I had finished explaining why I was hurt. I'll visit, I said. My father nodded, satisfied. Keep us updated if there are real changes. Not every mood swing. My mother touched my sleeve with 2 fingers. And don't upset her with estate talk. She gets sentimental around you. I looked at her hand until she removed it. Inside the room, Grandma coughed, and suddenly everyone in the hallway became background noise. Grandma Eleanor Whitaker's room was small but bright, overlooking a courtyard where someone had planted pansies too early for the season. She was propped against pillows, thinner than she had been the week before, oxygen tubing under her nose, but her eyes were still the same, sharp, amused, unwilling to flatter nonsense. Before she was a hospice patient, before she was a widow, before she was my father's mother, she had been a pianist. In the black and white photographs she kept in a cedar box, she sat at concert grand pianos under stage lights that made her hair look silver even when it was dark brown. She had played in Philadelphia, Boston, Cleveland, and once in a small New York hall where a review said her Chopin had the discipline of grief and the tenderness of restraint. My father hated that clipping because he did not understand why anyone would frame a newspaper review that did not mention money. Grandma loved it because, as she told me when I was 14 and crying after my parents missed my spring recital, some people hear applause. Some people hear meaning. Don't confuse the two, Claire. The Steinway had belonged to her mother before her, a black 1892 Model B with a warm, dark sound and a chipped ivory edge on middle C that Grandma refused to repair because her mother's ring had made it during a Christmas party in 1931. I learned my first scales on that piano standing on a footstool because my legs were too short to reach the pedals. Brooke used it as a shelf for prom flowers. My father called it, the old beast, whenever he had to dust around it. My mother complained that it made the living room look like a museum. But to me, that piano was the only room in my childhood where I had never been treated like an afterthought. Grandma did not care that I was not sparkling like Brooke, not ambitious in a way my father could brag about at Rotary lunches, not married successfully, not the kind of daughter who made people say Linda must be proud. She cared that I listened. She cared that when she played a phrase once, I could hum it back. She cared that I understood why she touched the keys before playing, the way some people touch a doorway before leaving home. This piano will be yours, she told me when I was 23. After my divorce papers were signed and my parents spent Thanksgiving asking whether I had learned anything from choosing badly. Not because you need furniture. Because you know how to keep something alive. I told her not to talk like that. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "Child, I am not giving you a ghost. I am giving you a responsibility." She repeated it every few years, always in front of people who pretended not to hear. The last time was 6 weeks before hospice, at Sunday dinner in her living room, while Brooke showed my mother photos of Lakeview Club and my father complained about the cost of flowers. Grandma set down her fork and said, "When I'm gone, the Steinway goes to Claire. That is settled." My father's jaw tightened. My mother looked at Brooke. Brooke rolled her eyes and said, "Claire already has that sad piano at the community center." Grandma's expression did not change, but the room got colder. "Claire has students," she said. "This is different." Nobody spoke for 12 seconds. I counted because I had spent a lifetime measuring the silences my family used instead of apologies. In hospice, when I sat beside her bed and took her hand, Grandma looked at me and said, "There's my Claire. Not useful Claire. Not dramatic Claire. Not poor Claire, divorced Claire, lonely Claire, the one who would handle it because Brooke had a life. Just my Claire." That was the first time I cried. Not loudly. Just one tear I could not stop. Grandma saw it, squeezed my fingers, and whispered, "Save the rest. We may need salt later." For the first 2 weeks, hospice rearranged my life in the way my family had always assumed my life could be rearranged without cost. I taught morning lessons, played at the community center, drove to Mercy Hospice, sat with Grandma until evening, stopped at her house to water plants and collect whatever she requested, then went home to a quiet rented townhouse on the edge of town. My divorce had taken the house years earlier, and my parents had taken the opportunity to say they had warned me. My ex-husband, Mark, had left me for a woman who sold luxury real estate with Brooke's fiancé, which was the kind of detail my family treated as proof that God had a sense of humor and I had poor judgment. I did not have children, another fact my mother used gently and often, as if childlessness made me permanently available to people whose lives counted more. But with Grandma, none of that mattered. In room 214, I was not the failed wife, not the disappointing daughter, not the woman who had chosen music over security and ended up with neither in my father's eyes. I was the person who knew she liked iced chips with 1 drop of cranberry juice, who could read her breathing well enough to know when visitors had stayed too long, who understood that when she asked for Bach she wanted order and when she asked for Chopin she wanted permission to grieve. I did not bring a keyboard because she hated bad speakers, but I hummed when pain tightened her face. Sometimes she joined with a whisper, not notes exactly, more memory than sound. One Thursday, she asked me to bring the cedar box from her living room, the one with concert programs, photographs, and letters tied in blue ribbon. "I want to see my mother's hands," she said. "There's a photograph from 1938. She's at the Steinway, wearing the ugly dress with the buttons." I promised I would get it after my last lesson. She watched me for a moment, then said, "Claire, if your father has been difficult about my house or my things, you tell me." "He's always difficult." "That is not what I asked." I looked down at her hand, at the blue veins under skin thin as onion paper. He hasn't said anything new. It was true at the time. Not complete, maybe, but true. The piano, she said. You remember what I told them? I remember. Say it. The Steinway is mine when you're gone. Not when I'm gone, she corrected. When I decide it should be in your care. Words matter. Men like your father survive on sloppy words. I frowned. Grandma, what does that mean? She closed her eyes. It means some doors need locks long before thieves arrive. I thought pain medication had softened the edges of her language. I thought she was tired. I did not know then that she had already built the lock, labeled the key, and put my name where my father would never think to look. The next afternoon, rain followed me from the community center to Grandma's house. It was the cold silver kind of April rain that makes old neighborhoods look abandoned even with lights glowing inside. Grandma's house sat on Ashbury Lane beneath 2 maple trees my grandfather had planted when my father was 12. I still had a key. My father hated that but had never been able to make Grandma take it back. I unlocked the side door, shook rain from my coat, and stepped into the kitchen. The house smelled wrong. Not bad. Hollow. Houses have sound even when no one is inside, the hum of a refrigerator, the tick of pipes, the breath of wood settling in weather. Grandma's house had always had another sound beneath those things, a felt presence from the living room, as if the Steinway held the room together even in silence. That day, the silence had no center. I knew before I crossed the hall. I knew, but knowing did not protect me from seeing. The living room was empty where the piano had stood for as long as I could remember. Not covered. Not moved for cleaning. Gone. A pale rectangle marked the carpet, bordered by darker dust lines and 4 round dents. Where the casters had pressed for decades. The wall behind it looked naked, too bright where framed photographs had been removed. The cedar box sat on the coffee table, untouched. Rain tapped against the windows. I stood with my hand on the doorframe and felt something inside me go very still. I called my mother first because some childhood reflexes survive humiliation. She answered on the 4th ring. Claire, I'm in the middle of something. Where is Grandma's piano? Silence. Not surprise. Calculation. Your father handled it. Handled what? Don't use that tone. It was taking up space, and there were practical considerations. I walked toward the empty rectangle like if I got close enough, the room might correct itself. Where is it? Claire. My mother lowered her voice. Your grandmother is dying. She does not need to worry about furniture. Furniture. I pressed my hand to my mouth so hard my teeth hurt. She promised it to me. She promised a lot of things over the years. People say sentimental things when they're old. Mom, where is the Steinway? Another pause. Then, cool and final, ask your father if you insist on making this unpleasant. She hung up. I stood there for a long time, staring at the dents in the carpet. Then I opened the cedar box, took out the photograph Grandma wanted, and found beneath it a concert program from 1974 with her name printed in elegant black letters. I put both in my bag. My hands were shaking so hard I had to sit down on the floor where the piano used to be. I was 52 years old, and for the first time in my life, I understood that my parents would take anything from me if they could first convince themselves I had no right to mourn it. I drove to their house with the photograph on the passenger seat. Their front door wore an ivory ribbon wreath because Brooke's wedding colors were ivory and sage, and apparently even the porch had been conscripted into her beautiful beginning. My father opened the door with a tumbler in his hand and the expression of a man interrupted during a private victory. What? He said. The Steinway. I did not step inside. Where is it? He sighed as if explaining taxes to a child. Sold. To a collector through Linden and Row in Philadelphia. $95,000. More than fair considering transport and restoration costs. The word sold split the evening in half. Past tense. Finished. You sold Grandma's piano. My mother's piano, he corrected. And I'm her son. She promised it to me. He took a sip of his drink. And what exactly were you going to do with a $95,000 instrument in your rental townhouse? Let your hospice friends sing around it? Something moved behind him. Brooke appeared in the hallway wearing a silk robe and holding champagne, a facial mask pushed up on her forehead, her engagement ring too large for her hand and exactly large enough for the life she wanted to display. Is this about the piano? She asked, then laughed softly. Claire, please don't be weird. It was just sitting there. I looked from her to my father. Where did the money go? My father's eyes narrowed. My mother came up behind Brooke, already wearing the face she used when I needed to be managed. Some of it went toward Brooke's wedding expenses, she said. Before you make that ugly, remember your grandmother loves Brooke too. Grandma did not sell her Steinway for Brooke's champagne wall. Brooke smiled with teeth. Actually, the champagne wall was Trevor's parents' gift. The piano helped with the lakefront floral arch and the string quartet, if you need details for your victim speech. My father chuckled. Not loudly. Just enough. That small sound did more damage than shouting would have. You used Grandma's piano money for a wedding. My voice sounded flat, almost calm. My mother stepped closer, pearls catching the foyer light. A wedding is a family event. Brooke is building a future. You, of all people, should understand how important a good start is after a failed first marriage. There it was. She never missed a chance to slide the knife in while sounding concerned. Brooke tilted her head. It's not like you perform anymore, Claire. You play sad songs. For dying people. That's sweet, but let's not pretend you're Carnegie Hall. My father pointed at me with the hand holding the glass. Do not tell your grandmother. She is frail, she is medicated, and if you upset her over an object, that is on you. Do you understand me? I looked at him for a long moment. No, I said. It surprised all of us. My mother blinked. Excuse me? No. I don't understand you. Not anymore. Then I turned and walked back into the rain before my father could decide whether anger or disbelief served him better. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the photograph from 1938 in front of me. Grandma's mother sat at the Steinway in the ugly button dress, hands lifted above the keys. Behind her, barely visible, a little girl with dark hair sat on the floor watching. Grandma, maybe 6 years old. I thought about calling Mercy Hospice and asking whether shock could harm a patient. I thought about my mother's voice. If you upset her over an object, that is on you. That was how my family did it. They turned truth into harm and silence into love. They stole, then made you responsible for the consequences of noticing. For hours, I argued with myself in the dark. Grandma had weeks, maybe less. Did she deserve peace, or did peace built on lies become another theft? At 2 a.m, I opened my laptop and searched Steinway values, antique piano consignment procedures, Pennsylvania trust asset laws, not because I knew what I was reading, but because helplessness needed somewhere to go. At 3, I found Brooke's wedding website. There were photos of Lakeview Club, the floral arch, the upgraded dinner menu, the string quartet listed under ceremony ambience, and a note that said, with gratitude to our families for helping us create the day we dreamed of. I stared at gratitude until the word lost shape. At 4, I opened old email and found one from Grandma sent 7 years earlier with the subject line, "For your records." It contained scans of concert programs and a message, "Claire, I am organizing things because your father believes disorder is permission. Save these somewhere safe. Love, G." I had never noticed that sentence before. Disorder is permission. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I showered, dressed, printed the photograph, the email, and screenshots from Brooke's wedding website, then drove to Mercy Hospice before my first lesson. Grandma was awake when I arrived, sitting up with her hair brushed and a blanket over her lap. Nurse Carol was adjusting her four-line. "You look like a ghost," Grandma said. "A judgmental ghost, which is worse." Carol smiled and left us alone. I sat beside the bed and took Grandma's hand. "I need to tell you something. And I need you to know I'm not telling you because of money." Her eyes sharpened. "The piano." My throat closed. "You knew?" I suspected. She turned her head toward the window, where morning light made the courtyard look almost kind. "Tell me anyway. Details matter." So I told her. The empty room. The sale. $95,000. The wedding upgrades. My father's warning. My mother's guilt. Brooke's joke. I told her everything, stopping twice because shame rose in me even though none of it belonged to me. When I finished, I braced for grief, anger, tears, something that would prove my parents right and make me the person who had hurt her. Instead, Grandma Eleanor closed her eyes, took one slow breath, and said, "Did Frank sign the consignment papers himself?" I stared at her. "What? Did he sign as owner?" "I don't know." She opened her eyes. They were tired, but not weak. "Then we find out." She reached toward the bedside table. "Hand me my phone, child. Your father has finally mistaken patience for permission." The man she called was named Alden Price. I had heard the name a few times over the years, usually when my father complained that lawyers charged too much to say simple things in complicated language. I did not know Alden had been Grandma's estate attorney for 31 years. I did not know he had been my grandfather's college roommate. I did not know he had drafted documents my father had signed and forgotten because he believed paper only mattered when he controlled it. Grandma put the call on speaker. Alden answered on the second ring, his voice low and careful. "Eleanor." "Alden," she said. "Frank sold the Steinway." Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. "Do you have confirmation?" Claire saw the empty room. Frank admitted the sale. 95,000. The wedding. Alden exhaled through his nose. "Did he state he had authority?" "We're going to find out," Grandma said. "Use the trust file." Another pause. "Are you certain you want to proceed now?" Grandma looked at me when she answered. "I am dying, not finished. There is a difference." Alden said he would come by that afternoon with a notary and asked whether Nurse Carol was on duty. Grandma said yes. He asked whether I could meet him the next morning at his office. I said yes before I understood why. When the call ended, Grandma leaned back against the pillows, suddenly paler. "You should have told me sooner," she said, "but there was no accusation in it. I was afraid it would hurt you." It does hurt me. But lies hurt more because they ask you to participate in your own erasure. I looked down at the printed photograph on my lap. "Grandma, what is the trust file?" Her mouth curved slightly. "Your father's least favorite surprise." Alden Price's office was above a closed bookstore on a brick street near the county courthouse. The sign on the door was small enough to miss if you were not looking for it, which seemed to be his general approach to power. He was 70, maybe older, with silver hair, a narrow face, and a way of moving that made every gesture look previously considered. His office smelled like paper, coffee, and old radiator heat. Legal books lined one wall. Framed photographs lined another, Alden with my grandparents in younger days, my grandmother at a piano, my grandfather holding a fishing rod and laughing at something outside the frame. Alden shook my hand with both of his. "Claire. Your grandmother trusts you more than anyone alive." I did not know what to do with that sentence, so I sat in the chair he offered and folded my hands like a student sent to the principal. He opened a green folder on the desk. "Your grandmother asked me to explain only what you need to know for now. More will come later, but we are working against time and your father's confidence." He removed the first document. 6 years ago, Eleanor created the Eleanor Whitaker Music Trust. Its purpose is to preserve certain musical assets, administer a small scholarship fund for low-income music students, and distribute specific personal property according to her written instructions. He slid the page toward me. I saw Grandma's name, then mine. Why is my name there? You are successor trustee upon her incapacity or death. The words seemed to rearrange the room. That can't be right. It is right. My father would never. Your father was informed. Alden removed another document. This is the family asset acknowledgment, signed by Frank Whitaker 5 years ago after he attempted to borrow against your grandmother's house to cover what he described as a temporary business obligation. My stomach tightened. Borrow against her house? Unsuccessfully. Eleanor stopped him. As part of resolving that incident privately, Frank signed acknowledgments regarding several protected assets. He tapped the page. The Steinway is listed here. He acknowledged he had no authority to sell, pledge, move, liquidate, or represent ownership of the piano without written authorization from Eleanor or the trustee. I read my father's signature. Frank D. Whitaker. Bold, confident, unmistakable. For years, he had signed birthday cards with that same aggressive slant, usually above a check smaller than my mother spent on Brooks brunches. He knew, I whispered. Yes. Alden watched me carefully. That matters. Not only morally. Legally. He pulled out a third page, a trust asset inventory listing the 1892 Steinway by serial number, appraised value range, provenance, and final intended beneficiary, Claire and Whitaker, for personal preservation and musical use. My name looked unreal there, typed in black ink as if the universe had recorded something my family had spent decades denying. Your grandmother did not merely promise you the piano over dinner, Alden said. She documented it. I touched the page, then pulled my hand back because it felt too important. Can we get it back? Possibly. The dealer has not completed final transfer to the buyer. But first we need records. Consignment agreement, bill of sale, payment path, any statement Frank made regarding ownership. Your grandmother also wants a nurse competency letter and a video statement completed, because your parents may claim you manipulated her. I almost laughed. They already are. Alden's expression did not change. Then we will be early. For the next week, my life became a quiet investigation that no one in my family knew was happening. That was the first time I understood the difference between secrecy and privacy. My parents had used secrecy to steal. Grandma used privacy to protect. Alden gave me a list and told me to move carefully, document everything, and speak as little as possible by phone. People who rely on pressure dislike written records, he said. I started with Linden and Rowe, the Philadelphia dealer my father had mentioned with the carelessness of a man who believed naming a reputable business made his theft respectable. The first call went badly. A receptionist transferred me to a consignment assistant who used a voice usually reserved for telemarketers and difficult relatives. I'm sorry, Ms. Whitaker, but our file lists Frank Whitaker as the authorized family representative and lawful owner. We can't release documents to another family member. The piano belonged to Eleanor Whitaker. Again, ma'am, our file lists Frank Whitaker. Ma'am. The word was polite, but I heard the door closing in it. I could almost see how my father had described me, emotional, unmarried, attached to an old instrument, likely to make noise. What documents did he provide to show ownership? I asked. I can't discuss the file. Did he provide trust authorization? A pause. Ma'am, I can't discuss the file. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my car outside the community center with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The old Claire would have felt foolish for asking. The new Claire forwarded Alden the contact name. 2 hours later, he sent a formal trustee notice, a copy of the trust inventory, and a demand to preserve all records pending title review. At 4:37, the same assistant called me back. Her voice had changed. Not warmer exactly. Sharper with caution. Ms. Whitaker, our legal department is reviewing the matter. We can confirm the instrument remains in our controlled restoration facility and has not been released to the buyer. We will preserve the file. Thank you, I said. Also, she added, sounding like someone reading from advice she had been given, the pickup receipt and release confirmation will be sent to Mr. Price. The next morning, Alden showed me the receipt, removed from Eleanor Whitaker's residence, April 18, 10:40 a.m., release signed by Frank D. Whitaker as owner. My father's signature again. The second door had opened. The other evidence came in pieces, each one small enough to be dismissed alone and heavy when stacked together. Brooke's wedding website was a gift to any future courtroom because my sister had never met an expensive detail she did not want witnessed. Her Instagram stories showed the lakefront floral arch with, upgraded thanks to Mom and Dad, tagged the string quartet, tagged the photographer, and reposted Lakeview Club's own video of the champagne wall reflected in the ballroom windows. Her wedding website listed recent enhancements, with the giddy shamelessness of someone who believed money became clean when spent beautifully. I took screenshots with dates. Aunt Ruth sent me the first accidental inside confirmation. She was my mother's older sister, a woman who loved gossip but preferred to call it per concern. She texted, "Your mother says you're upset about the piano. Please don't ruin Brooke's week. Your grandmother wanted the family to look united." I replied with one sentence Alden had approved. "Do you know when Mom and Dad decided to use the piano sale proceeds for wedding expenses?" She answered too quickly, "Your father said the check cleared the same day Lakeview needed the deposit." Timing was a blessing. Then she added, "You didn't hear that from me." I screenshotted it before she could delete it. Nurse Carol signed a competency note stating that Eleanor Whitaker was alert, oriented, able to identify family members, able to understand her assets, and able to give instructions regarding legal matters on the date Alden visited. Grandma also recorded a video statement, sitting upright with her hair combed, saying in a clear voice that she had not authorized Frank or Linda Whitaker to sell, move, pledge, or represent ownership of the Steinway, that the piano was part of the Eleanor Whitaker Music Trust, that I was to assist Alden, and that if her son claimed she was confused, everyone should ask why. A confused woman kept better records than he did. While we gathered paper, my family gathered pressure. My mother began with texts because she knew I was no longer answering calls. "Claire, your father is very hurt by your attitude. This is not the time to make Grandma's final weeks about your feelings." 10 minutes later, "Brooke is under enormous stress. A decent sister would not add to it." Then, "You have always struggled when attention is not on you. Please do not embarrass yourself at the rehearsal dinner." I read those messages at my kitchen table while a pot of soup cooled on the stove. My first instinct was still to defend myself, to type paragraphs explaining that I did not want attention, that I wanted the truth, that I wanted them to stop looting a dying woman's life for wedding decor. But Alden's voice was in my head. People who rely on pressure dislike written records. So I wrote only, "Please communicate by text about Grandma's property going forward." My mother did not respond for an hour. Then, "There is no property issue. There is only your jealousy." Brooke called next. I let it go to voicemail. Her message began sweet and ended sharp. "Claire, I know you're having one of your emotional spirals, but I need you to understand something. This week is not about you. Trevor's parents are coming to the rehearsal dinner, and Dad is finally in a good place with them. If you bring up Grandma's old piano, you will look insane. Everyone knows she loved all of us. Also, honestly, do you even know what it costs to maintain a Steinway? You can barely keep your Subaru from making that noise." She laughed softly, then lowered her voice. "Don't punish me because your life didn't turn out beautiful." I saved the voicemail. My father waited until Tuesday morning. His text was short, "Your grandmother is not competent to discuss assets. Stop interfering." I stared at that sentence in the parking lot outside Mercy Hospice, then walked inside and showed it to Alden, who happened to be leaving Grandma's room with the notary. He read it, smiled without humor, and said, "Excellent. He has chosen his defense before seeing our evidence." Grandma was sitting by the window when I entered. She looked weaker every day, but there was a strange lightness in her face now, as if telling the truth had given her back some private room inside herself. "What did Frank say?" she asked. I hesitated. "He says you're not competent." She laughed. Not long, because laughing hurt, but enough. He always did confuse disagreement with decline. Then she looked at me, and the laughter left. "Claire, they will say you caused this. They will say you manipulated me. They will say you are bitter, lonely, unstable, jealous, dramatic, anything that keeps them from saying they were wrong. You must not help them by performing the role they wrote for you. What do I do instead? Sit still. Let them speak. Let the documents answer. You have spent your life trying to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. Stop auditioning for them." The rehearsal dinner was still 5 days away when my father escalated from pressure to strategy. A certified letter arrived at my townhouse from a local attorney I had never heard of, apparently one of my father's golf acquaintances. The letter accused me of exerting undue emotional influence over an elderly hospice patient, creating confusion regarding family property, and threatening to disrupt a private wedding event. It warned that any attempt to interfere with Brooke's rehearsal dinner at Lakeview Club would be treated as harassment and that security had been advised. The language was too grand for the facts, like a child wearing his father's suit. Still, my hands shook as I read it. There is a difference between knowing you have done nothing wrong and receiving a letter designed to make innocence feel expensive. I scanned it and sent it to Alden. He called 3 minutes later. Do not respond. Can he keep me out of the rehearsal dinner? Who is hosting? My parents, technically. But Brooke invited me months ago. Grandma too, before hospice. Do you have the invitation? I went to the junk drawer where I had thrown the ivory envelope after opening it. Brooke's rehearsal dinner invitation was there, embossed with Lake Reed's and her new monogram, because of course she had a monogram before the wedding. My name was written as Miss Claire Whitaker, no guest. I have it. Good. Bring it. Alden, I don't want to cause a scene. You will not cause a scene. Frank will. We are going to let him. That sentence stayed with me all night. I tried to imagine walking into Lakeview Club past people who had been warned that I was unstable, sitting quietly while my father performed generosity with stolen money, and not becoming exactly what my mother said I was. Every part of my body wanted to avoid it. I was good at absence. I had built a life out of stepping back when rooms got too loud. But Grandma was fading in room 214, and my father was preparing to rewrite her wishes in front of witnesses. On Thursday, I visited after lunch. She was having a bad pain day, her face tight, her breathing shallow. I almost did not tell her about the lawyer letter, but she saw it in my expression. What now? She asked. I showed her. She read slowly, lips pressed together. Frank always did love a borrowed weapon. Grandma, maybe we should handle this privately. Through Alden. After the wedding. Her eyes moved to mine. That is what they are counting on. You're sick. Yes. This is Brooke's wedding week. Yes. People will say I ruined it. People say many things when consequences arrive wearing good shoes. I looked away because I was tired, and because some part of me still wanted permission to disappear. Grandma's voice softened. Claire, your sister's wedding is not being ruined by the truth. It was financed by a lie. There is a difference. She motioned to the chair beside her. I sat. She rested her hand over mine. Your father will use my illness as a curtain. Pull it back. What if I can't? Then sit still while Alden does. You do not have to become loud to become firm. She closed her eyes, then whispered, bring the photograph of my mother at the piano. Not for court. For you. By Friday, my family had turned me into a problem everyone was being asked to endure. Aunt Ruth called and left a voicemail saying she loved me but hoped I would choose Grace. Cousin Melanie texted that weddings were stressful and maybe I should let this go until after the honeymoon. My mother sent a long message beginning with Claire, I say this as your mother, which always meant she was about to say something cruel and expect gratitude for the packaging. She wrote that Brooke had spent years rebuilding her life, that Trevor's family was not used to drama, that Grandma would never forgive me for humiliating the family, and that if I truly loved Grandma, I would stay away from anything that might upset her reputation. Then came the sentence that finally broke the last thread of my old obedience: "You have always been more comfortable around decline than happiness. Please do not drag Brooke into your sadness." I read it once. Then again. Then I set the phone on the table and did something I had never done after one of my mother's messages. I did not cry. I opened a blank document and started building a timeline. Grandma states Steinway is to go to Claire, Sunday dinner, 6 weeks before hospice. Grandma moved to Mercy Hospice, April 9th. Steinway removed from Ashbury Lane, April 18th, 10:40 a.m., per pickup receipt. Frank admits sale, April 18th evening, states $95,000. Linda states proceeds went toward Brooke wedding expenses. Brooke confirms piano money helped with lakefront floral arch and string quartet. Frank warns Claire not to tell Eleanor. Eleanor informed, April 19th. Alden Price contacted. Nurse Carol competency note, April 19th. Frank text claims Eleanor not competent, April 22nd. Attorney letter accuses Claire of undue influence, April 23rd. I attached screenshots beneath each entry. By the end, I could see the shape of the story without my family's fog around it. They had stolen, lied, threatened, preemptively discredited me, and called all of it family protection. On the day of the rehearsal dinner, I visited Grandma before getting dressed. Mercy Hospice was quiet in the late morning, the hallways softened by weekend staffing and family speaking low around doors. Nurse Carol met me outside room 214 and touched my arm. "She's tired today," she said. "But she asked for you." Grandma was in bed, eyes closed, the oxygen machine whispering beside her. For a moment, I thought she was asleep, but she said, "Did you bring the photograph?" I pulled it from my bag and placed it in her hands. She looked at her mother at the Steinway for a long time. "That dress really was ugly," she said. I laughed because she wanted me to. Then she looked at me. "What are you wearing tonight?" "A navy dress. The one from the college recital." "Good. Serious but not funereal." "Grandma. Do not wear black. Your mother will say you came dressed for my death." Even weak, she knew them too well. I sat beside her, holding the photograph between us. "Are you sure you want this tonight?" She turned her head slowly. I wanted my son to do the right thing without being forced. He declined. "He'll say I did this." "Let him. Brooke will hate me." Brooke already treats love like a seating chart. I smiled despite myself. Grandma's fingers moved over the edge of the photograph. "Claire, I need you to hear something. The piano was always yours because you understood it. But the trust is not only about you. There is money in it for lessons, repairs, scholarships. Not millions. Enough. Enough for children whose parents think music is impractical until it saves them. Enough for the community center if you choose." Frank would have spent it all making himself look generous. I stared at her. Alden had mentioned the scholarship fund, but not the reality of it. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed you to live your life without waiting for me to die." That broke something in me. I lowered my head, and she stroked my hair the way she had when I was a child. "I don't want the money," I whispered. "I know. That is one reason you can be trusted with it." Before I left, she asked me to open the small drawer beside her bed. Inside was a velvet pouch. In the pouch was a brass key, old and heavy. "What is it?" "The Steinway key. For the fallboard. My mother wore it on a chain when she traveled." I closed my fingers around it. "It won't open anything if the piano doesn't come back." Grandma's eyes sharpened one last time. "Keys are not only for locks, Claire. Sometimes they remind you which doors were always yours." Lakeview Club sat 15 minutes outside town, down a road lined with sycamores and expensive mailboxes. I arrived at 6:12, 3 minutes earlier than I had said, because being exactly on time felt like giving my family one more chance to call me careless. The building had stone columns, wide windows, and a circular driveway where valet attendants moved between SUVs and polished sedans. Through the glass, I could see candles on tables and women in rehearsal dinner dresses laughing with tilted heads. I parked my own car instead of using valet. My navy dress was 7 years old but well tailored. My shoes were comfortable. The brass key was in my purse. The green folder was under my arm. As I walked toward the entrance, the lake behind the club reflected the late sun in strips of gold. For one irrational second, I wanted to turn around and drive back to hospice, where at least pain told the truth. Then the front doors opened, and a young woman with a headset stepped out, followed by a man in a dark suit with a security earpiece. "Ms. Whitaker?" "Yes. I'm Mara, the event manager." There was some confusion about the guest list. Her smile was professional but cautious. "The bride's family indicated there may be a concern about your attendance. I have my invitation." I removed it from the folder and handed it to her. She glanced at it, then at the security guard. "Mrs. Whitaker requested that if you arrived with documents or attempted to discuss private family matters, you not be admitted to the dining room." There it was. Not a misunderstanding. A barricade. The guard shifted, not aggressive, just ready to become official if a middle-aged woman with an old folder became the unstable story she had been cast to play. My heartbeat rose, but my voice stayed level. "Mr. Alden Price should already be here." Mara's expression changed at the name. "Yes. Mr. Price is inside. Please tell him Claire Whitaker is here." The guard looked at my folder. "Ma'am, we can't allow a disturbance." Before I could answer, Alden appeared behind Mara in the doorway, wearing his charcoal suit and carrying a leather folio. "She is not a disturbance," he said. "She is the successor trustee." The words did not land loudly. They landed accurately. Mara stepped back at once. The guards suddenly found the lake very interesting. Alden held the door open for me. "Right on time," he said. "They tried to stop me. They attempted to manage access." Different verb. Same arrogance. He placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. "Are you ready?" "No, good. People who feel ready for this sort of thing are usually the problem." Inside, the lobby smelled like lilies, butter, and money. A framed sign on an easel showed Brooke and Trevor's names in gold script surrounded by watercolor reeds. I looked away before I could resent stationery. Alden and I entered the banquet room together, though he peeled away almost immediately to a small table near the back where two people I did not know sat with coffee instead of wine. Witnesses, I realized later. The room was beautiful in the way Brooke liked things beautiful, controlled, photographed, expensive enough to silence questions. Long tables formed a U-shape around a small open area where toasts would happen. The lakefront floral arch stood near the windows, dripping white roses. A string quartet tuned softly in one corner. The champagne wall glittered beside the gift table. At the front, Brooke stood in an ivory rehearsal dress, laughing with Trevor's mother, who wore emerald silk and the expression of a woman accustomed to evaluating other families' usefulness. My mother saw me first. Her face did not fall. Linda Whitaker had too much practice for that. It tightened, then rearranged itself into pained welcome. "Claire," she said, crossing the room quickly. "You came." "I was invited." "This is not the night." "For what?" Her eyes flicked to the folder. "For whatever performance you've planned." I looked at her, really looked, and saw not a mother frightened for a dying woman, but a hostess terrified of losing control of her table. "I'm here for dinner," I said. She leaned closer, voice low. "If you embarrass your sister, you will regret it." There it was, naked under the pearls. "Mom," I said quietly, "I have regretted things for both of us long enough." For a second, she had no answer. Then Brooke appeared, smelling like expensive perfume and panic hidden under sugar. "Claire. You made it." She hugged me with one arm, careful not to press too close. "We put you at table 6. You won't mind. It's near the kitchen, but honestly the service is amazing, so you'll probably get food first." Trevor's mother glanced over with polite curiosity. Brooke touched my folder. "What's that?" I moved it out of reach. "Something Grandma asked me to bring." Brooke's smile thinned. "Grandma isn't here." "No," I said. "But her wishes are." Brooke's eyes hardened. Then she laughed lightly for the benefit of anyone watching. Still dramatic. "Come on, I'll show you your seat." Table 6 had 4 chairs, though only 2 were set. It was positioned near the swinging kitchen doors, partly blocked by a column and far enough from the main family table to communicate exactly what my mother intended without requiring her to say it. My place card read Claire in plain script, no last name, as if I might be confused with another middle-aged disappointment. The other setting belonged to Aunt Ruth, who arrived 5 minutes later wearing lavender and moral discomfort. "Oh, honey," she said when she saw me. "I didn't know they put you back here too." "Just me, apparently." She sat, adjusted her napkin, and lowered her voice. "Your mother says you've been very upset." "My mother says a lot of things." "Well, weddings bring emotions up." I looked toward the front table where Brooke was showing Trevor's parents the floral arch. "So does theft." Aunt Ruth flinched. "Claire. Did you know Dad sold the Steinway before or after the Lakeview deposit was due?" She looked down at her plate. "This isn't the place." "That's what everyone keeps telling me." "Because it's true." I turned toward her. "Where was the place, Aunt Ruth?" "Grandma's empty living room?" "My parents' foyer?" while Brooke laughed. "Hospice, where Dad says Grandma is too incompetent to know what he took." "Tell me the correct room for this conversation, and I'll go there." Her mouth opened, then closed. Servers brought salads before she could answer. Across the room, my father moved from guest to guest, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, accepting congratulations for a wedding he had not paid for with his own sacrifice. Every few minutes, his eyes landed on me and slid away. He had decided I was contained, the back table, the warning letter, the venue alert, the unstable daughter safely placed near the kitchen. My mother sat beside Trevor's mother, performing warmth like a woman playing a role she had paid a stylist to choose. Brooke glowed under attention, raising her hand often enough that the diamond caught the chandelier light. I ate my salad. I listened. I did not speak unless spoken to. And all the while, I felt the green folder beside my chair like a second heartbeat. Dinner moved slowly through courses I barely tasted: soup, fish, chicken, vegetables tied with leek, wine poured by servers who were trained not to notice tension unless it affected timing. Toasts began. Trevor's best man told a story about golf and loyalty that made men laugh too loudly. Brooke's maid of honor cried through a speech about second chances. Trevor's father welcomed Brooke into the family and said they admired the Whittaker tradition of resilience and refinement, which made my mother's eyes shine. Then my father stood. He buttoned his jacket. He lifted his glass. He looked around the room, waiting until every face turned toward him. I saw Alden at the back table close his folio and rest his hands on top of it. My father smiled. "Family," he began, "is measured by what we are willing to give each other." There are sentences so dishonest they seem to create their own weather. My father's toast changed the air in the room. When Linda and I looked at what Brooke and Trevor were building, we knew we wanted to help give them a start worthy of the love they've found. Many of you know my mother, Eleanor, could not be here tonight because of her health. But I want everyone to know she is here in spirit. My mother pressed her napkin to her eyes. Brooke lowered her gaze at the perfect angle. Mother always believed in beauty, my father said. She believed music could bless a house. And in a very real way, her old Steinway helped make this wedding possible. She would have wanted Brooke to have a beautiful beginning. The words landed exactly where he intended them to land, soft, sentimental, impossible to challenge without looking cruel. A few guests murmured. Someone said, "How lovely." Brooke put a hand over her heart. Trevor kissed her temple. My father looked toward me for half a second, just long enough to let me know he had said it on purpose. He had taken the theft and turned it into a blessing in public. He had wrapped my grandmother's stolen piano in ribbon and dared me to tear it open. My old self would have gone hot, stood too quickly, said too much, given my mother the performance she had predicted. Instead, I heard Grandma's voice, "Sit still. Let them speak." My father continued, growing more confident. "I know Mother has always had a special attachment to that instrument, but at a certain point, things are meant to serve people, not the other way around. And what better use could there be than helping her granddaughter step into a new life?" Alden stood. He did not rush. He did not clear his throat. He simply rose, buttoned his jacket, and said, "Frank." The room turned. My father's smile faltered. "Alden?" My mother's napkin froze under her eye. Brooke's head snapped toward the back table. Alden walked forward carrying his green legal folder. "Before you continue speaking on behalf of Eleanor, I need to correct several statements for the record." My father's face reddened. "This is a private family event. It became a trust matter when you publicly represented the unauthorized sale of a trust asset as Eleanor's blessing." The words were calm, but they cracked across the room harder than a shout. Trevor's mother straightened. Mara, the lake club manager standing near the service entrance, became very interested in not moving. My father set his glass down. "Alden, not here." "You chose here," Alden said. "You chose this room, these witnesses, and those words." My mother stood halfway. "Mr. Price, Eleanor is very ill. This is cruel." Alden turned to her. "Mrs. Whitaker," Eleanor anticipated that objection. He removed one page and held it up. "This is a competency statement signed by Nurse Carol Bennett at Mercy Hospice and notarized yesterday, confirming that Eleanor Whitaker is alert, oriented, and capable of giving legal instructions regarding her property and trust assets." Murmurs moved through the room. My father barked a laugh. "You dragged a hospice nurse into this?" "No," Alden said. "Your conduct did." Then he looked at my father over his glasses. "Shall we continue privately, or would you prefer to keep the audience you selected when you credited your mother's piano for this wedding?" My father made the mistake men like him make when public image matters more than legal danger. He chose performance. "Everyone, I apologize," he said, turning toward the room with his palms open. "This is an unfortunate misunderstanding. My daughter has been emotional about Mother's decline and has apparently involved Alden in something she does not understand." Alden's expression did not change. "Claire understands quite well. She's a piano teacher," my father snapped. "She is successor trustee of the Eleanor Whitaker Music Trust." Silence. Real silence, not polite quiet. The kind that makes glassware sound alive. Brooke whispered, "What?" My mother sat down slowly. Trevor looked at Brooke, then at my father. Alden placed the first document on the nearest table, angled so my father could see it. The trust was established 6 years ago. The 1892 Steinway Model B, serial number listed here, was entered as a protected trust asset with a specific distribution instruction, preservation and eventual transfer to Claire Whitaker for musical use. It was not available for liquidation. My father's mouth tightened. "Mother never told me that." Alden removed the second page. "You signed this acknowledgment 5 years ago." He waited while my father looked. "This is your signature, correct?" My father did not answer. Alden continued anyway. "In this document, you acknowledged that you had no authority to sell, pledge, move, liquidate, or represent ownership of the Steinway without written authorization from Eleanor or the trustee. You also acknowledged that doing so could expose you to civil recovery claims." Brooke stepped forward, her face pale under makeup. "Dad?" My father lifted a hand toward her without looking away from Alden. "This is legal technical nonsense. No, Alden said. A legal technicality is a missed comma. This is a signed acknowledgment. Trevor's father, who had said almost nothing all evening, leaned toward my father. Frank, did you have authority to sell the piano? My father turned on him too quickly. It was my mother's piano. That was not my question. The room shifted. My father felt it. For the first time, the audience he had cultivated was not following his cue. Alden removed the next document. Linden and Rowe received the Steinway on consignment under a statement signed by you as lawful owner. The release confirmation shows removal from Eleanor Whitaker's home on April 18 at 10:40 a.m. The preliminary sale price was $95,000. He placed another page down. We also have records and public statements indicating that substantial wedding enhancements at Lakeview Club were paid shortly after those proceeds cleared. Brooke spun toward me. You got my wedding invoices? I stood then, slowly, because my body seemed to understand before my mind did that I did not need permission. No, I said. You posted half of them online. My sister's face twisted in a way I had seen only a few times, usually when praise escaped her and landed on someone else. This is disgusting, Brooke said. You're actually doing this at my rehearsal dinner? I looked at her ivory dress, the flowers, the champagne wall, the string quartet sitting frozen with instruments in their laps. You let Dad use Grandma's piano money for your wedding. I didn't know about some trust. You knew it was Grandma's piano. Everyone knew Grandma wasn't using it. That sentence did something no insult had done all evening. It made the room colder. Even Trevor's mother looked away. I took one step forward, not toward Brooke exactly, but toward the center of the room where my father's toast had tried to turn theft into generosity. She wasn't using it because she was dying, I said. Not because it was available. Brooke's eyes filled, but they were angry tears, not grieving ones. You have always wanted to make me feel guilty for having things. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I finally heard the machinery underneath. No, Brooke. I wanted you to stop taking things and calling my grief jealousy. My mother stood fully now. Enough. Claire, sit down. 2 words from childhood, unchanged. Sit down. Be smaller. Return to the assigned place near the kitchen. I looked at her. No, my mother recoiled as if I had thrown something. Alden resumed, because the papers still had work to do. Eleanor has instructed us to pursue return of the Steinway if possible. Since final buyer possession has not occurred, we have notified Linden and Rowe that title is disputed. We are also issuing a demand that the $95,000 in proceeds be returned to the trust account within 10 business days pending resolution. Brooke gasped. Returned? From where? Alden looked at her, not unkindly. From whoever received or benefited from the proceeds. You can't take money from my wedding. No one is taking money from your wedding, Alden said. We are recovering trust assets from an unauthorized sale. Trevor stepped back slightly. It was small, maybe only 6 inches, but Brooke felt it. She turned to him. Trevor. He looked at my father. Frank, is any of this connected to the venue account? My father had recovered enough anger to use it as a shield. This old man is making threats at my daughter's wedding dinner because Claire can't stand seeing her sister happy. Alden closed the folder halfway. Frank, if this were merely about Claire's feelings, I would not be here. I am here because you sold an asset you had acknowledged you did not own, under a representation that appears false, and then allowed those proceeds to be used in a way that may require recovery. I would advise you to stop discussing motive and call counsel. My father leaned close enough that his voice dropped but still carried. You were my father's friend. Alden's eyes hardened for the first time. Yes. Which is why I remember how hard he worked to protect Eleanor from exactly this kind of son. The room broke after that, not loudly at first, but in layers. Trevor's mother asked Mara whether Lakeview Club could separate pending charges from disputed payments. Mara said she would need to consult accounting. Brooke began crying in earnest when Trevor asked to speak with his parents privately. My mother moved between guests saying, "This is a misunderstanding," but the phrase weakened each time she repeated it. Aunt Ruth sat at table 6 with both hands over her mouth, staring at me as if I had become someone she had not been warned to expect. My father stepped outside onto the terrace with his phone, probably calling the golf attorney who had written me that ridiculous letter. Through the windows, I could see him pacing beside the lake, one hand cutting the air. Alden came to stand beside me. "You did well." I shook my head. "I barely did anything." That was the point. Brooke approached before I could say more. Mascara had begun to darken beneath her eyes. "Are you happy now?" she asked. There it was, the question people ask when they want consequences to look like cruelty. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was still beautiful. Even distressed, even furious, she had the kind of face people rushed to comfort. For decades, I had mistaken that for power. Now I saw the trap in it too. Brooke had been rewarded for never needing to ask whether what she received had cost someone else too much. "No," I said. "I'm not happy. You humiliated me. Dad humiliated Grandma. You benefited from it. I didn't sign anything." "No. You just laughed when I asked where the piano went." Her mouth trembled. "It was supposed to be my week." I thought about Grandma in the hospice bed, holding the photograph of her mother's hands. It was supposed to be Grandma's piano. Brooke wiped at her face. "You always do this. You make everything sad." For the first time, that accusation did not enter me. It landed at my feet like an object I could choose not to pick up. "No," I said. "I notice when things are already sad." She stared at me as if the sentence were in another language. Then Trevor appeared behind her. "Brooke, we need to talk." She turned quickly. "Not now." "Now." His voice was quiet, but something had changed. Brooke looked from him to his parents to the room full of relatives pretending not to listen. The future she had arranged so carefully had begun to ask for receipts. My mother rushed over. "Trevor, please, this is a family matter." Trevor's mother stepped in before he could answer. "Linda, if funds connected to a disputed trust asset were used for wedding payments, it concerns our family as well." My mother's face went blank with offense. "We are not criminals." Alden, who had the timing of a man accustomed to courtrooms, said, "No one has used that word here." Then he paused. "Yet." My father came back from the terrace just in time to hear it. "Get out," he said to Alden. "All of you. Claire, leave." I looked at him. Gladly. Then I picked up my folder, walked to table 6, took Grandma's photograph from my purse, and placed it on the table for one moment so Aunt Ruth could see it, the little girl on the floor watching her mother at the Steinway. Aunt Ruth began to cry. I did not comfort her. Some tears belonged to the people who arrived late to the truth. Outside, the lake had gone dark. The club's lights stretched across the water in trembling lines, and the air smelled like wet stone and cut flowers. I stood near the valet stand while Alden spoke with Mara about preserving payment records. Guests began leaving in small, embarrassed clusters. Some avoided my eyes. Some looked at me with curiosity sharpened by guilt. Cousin Melanie whispered, "Claire, I didn't know," as she passed, but she did not stop long enough for an answer. Aunt Ruth came out wrapped in her lavender shawl, face blotchy. "Honey," she said. I turned. She held her phone in both hands. "I sent you something. I should have sent it earlier." My phone buzzed. The message contained a screenshot from a family group chat I had been excluded from years ago because, according to my mother, I didn't enjoy casual banter. In the screenshot, dated 2 days after the piano was removed, my father had written, "Claire will make noise if she finds out before the wedding." Linda replied, "She won't tell Mother. She's too afraid of hurting her." Brooke responded with 3 laughing emojis and, Put me down for Team Old Piano Buys New Life. Under it, my mother had written, "Don't joke." But yes. I stared at the screen until the words stopped moving. Aunt Ruth was crying harder now. I thought it was just family talk. I didn't understand the trust part. I looked at her. You understood enough not to send it. She flinched. I'm sorry. Maybe she was. Maybe remorse had finally become more uncomfortable than loyalty. I saved the screenshot. Thank you for sending it now. It was the most I could offer. My father's voice came from behind me. Claire. I turned. He stood under the portico light, tie loosened, face flushed, looking older than he had 2 hours before and more dangerous because of it. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what you did. He stepped closer. You think that old woman is going to leave you in charge of anything? You think playing nurse for a few weeks makes you important? Alden moved slightly, but I lifted a hand. Not to stop him. To let myself answer. Grandma put me in charge because I know the difference between preserving something and spending it. My father laughed, ugly and short. You're a lonely middle-aged piano teacher who got handed a folder and suddenly thinks she's somebody. There it was, the family truth stripped of manners. My mother whispered, Frank, because he had said it in front of witnesses, not because she disagreed. I held the brass key through the fabric of my purse. No, I said. I'm the person Grandma trusted after you proved she couldn't trust you. His hand twitched like he wanted to point, grab, control something. Alden's voice cut in. Frank, I would strongly recommend you leave. My father looked at him, then at the valet attendants, Mara, Aunt Ruth, and 2 guests pretending to wait for cars. His audience had changed again. He could feel it. He turned without another word and walked toward the parking lot. My mother followed, but before she did, she looked at me with pure, exhausted hatred and said, I hope it was worth it. I thought about Grandma. The empty carpet. The signed acknowledgment. The photograph. It was necessary, I said. I drove to hospice instead of home. Visiting hours were technically over, but Nurse Carol let me in through the side entrance after one look at my face. She's awake, Carol whispered. Barely. Grandma's room was dim except for the lamp beside her bed. The courtyard outside was black, and the window reflected my own face back at me, older than I felt, steadier than I expected. Grandma opened her eyes when I sat down. Well, she whispered. I took her hand. Dad gave the toast. Of course he did. He said the Steinway helped make Brooke's wedding possible. Her mouth tightened. Useful idiot. I almost laughed. Then I told her everything. Not all the details, not the shouting, not Brooke's mascara, not my father calling me a lonely middle-aged piano teacher. I told her the papers were presented, the trust was named, the acknowledgment shown, the demand made. I told her Lakeview was reviewing payment records. I told her Alden had been perfect. Grandma listened with her eyes closed. When I finished, she asked, Did you stand? Yes. Did you shout? No, good. She opened her eyes. Did it hurt? That was the question nobody else would ask. Not did you win? Not what happens next. Did it hurt? I nodded. Yes. Truth often does when it has to pass through family. I reached into my purse and took out the brass key. I held this the whole time. Her fingers curled around mine. Then she was there. Who? My mother. Me. You. All of us who touched that key instead of selling it. Her breathing grew rough for a moment. I reached for the nurse call button, but she shook her head. Listen. There will be letters. Calls. Rage. Your father will try to make the recovery feel like your cruelty. Brooke will measure the damage in flowers and photographs. Linda will measure it in embarrassment. Do not let people who spent stolen money define the cost of returning it. Tears slipped down my face then, quietly. I'm tired, Grandma. I know. I don't want to fight them forever. Then don't. Let the documents fight. You live. She closed her eyes again. I thought she had drifted off, but after a minute she said, if the piano comes back, do not put it in a house where people whisper around it. Where should it go? Somewhere children can make ugly sounds until they find beautiful ones. I smiled through tears. The community center? If you choose. And if it doesn't come back? Her hand tightened around mine. Then build the music anyway. A stolen instrument is not a stolen inheritance if you keep the purpose alive. She slept after that. I stayed until Carol told me I needed to go. In the hallway, Alden texted, Frank's attorney contacted me. He is upset. That word, upset, after everything, made me laugh so suddenly that Carol looked concerned. I typed back, good. Then I drove home through empty streets feeling not victorious, not peaceful, but unhooked from something that had been dragging behind me for decades. The next morning, the backlash began. My mother sent 14 texts before 10. Brooke left 6 voicemails. My father sent nothing directly, which was worse because Frank Whitaker did not go quiet unless he was either winning or planning. By noon, the first family email arrived. Subject line, what Claire did last night. My father had copied relatives, 2 church friends, and, accidentally or deliberately, Trevor's parents. He wrote that I had exploited Grandma's declining state, fed her false fears, manipulated a confused hospice patient into signing documents, and coordinated with Alden Price to stage a public attack at Brooke's rehearsal dinner. He described the piano as an item mother no longer used, the trust as documents Claire suddenly produced, and me as a lonely person who has long resented her sister's happiness. He ended with, we are exploring legal remedies to protect Eleanor from further undue influence and to prevent Claire from misusing family assets for personal revenge. I read it once at my kitchen table. Then I read it again, slower, because fear works best when you let it blur the words. Undue influence. Misusing family assets. Legal remedies. The room seemed to tilt. Public humiliation I had survived. This was different. This was a second story being built around me, one that did not need to win morally if it could make me too expensive to believe. I forwarded it to Alden. He called within 5 minutes. Are you all right? No, good answer. Do not respond to the email. He's saying I manipulated her. Of course he is. The man who sold a trust asset while his mother was in hospice now needs hospice to mean incapacity. We prepared for this. Can he freeze the trust? Alden paused, and that pause told me more than reassurance would have. He can try. And he may have already found someone willing to file something dramatic. What happens if he does? Then we answer with the record. The record. My new inheritance, apparently, paper, dates, signatures, video, proof. I looked at Grandma's brass key on the table. Alden, what if the judge believes him? Then we appeal. But Claire, judges hear accusations from frightened families every day. They also understand signatures. Your father gave us his signature twice, once when he acknowledged he could not sell the piano, and once when he claimed he owned it anyway. I breathed for the first time in several seconds. What do you need from me? The email. All texts. All voicemails. The group chat screenshot Aunt Ruth sent. And I want you at my office tomorrow morning. Frank has made this about your character. We will make it about his documents. By Monday afternoon, Frank's golf attorney had filed an emergency petition seeking to suspend my authority as successor trustee pending review of Grandma's competence and alleged undue influence. The petition did not say the Steinway was lawfully sold. It did not say my father had not signed the acknowledgment. It did not even say the wedding funds had no connection to the sale. It said I had isolated Grandma, inflamed her fears, and caused irreparable family division during her final weeks. It asked the court to freeze trust action, including efforts to unwind the piano sale or recover funds, until a hearing could be held. When Alden handed me a copy, I felt the old shame rise, hot and irrational, as if being accused of something had made me partly guilty. He watched my face. "That feeling is not evidence," he said. "It is training." We prepared for the emergency hearing in 48 hours. Prepared meant sitting in Alden's office under fluorescent lights while every private humiliation became an exhibit. My mother's texts calling me jealous. Brooke's voicemail about punishing her because my life was not beautiful. My father's message claiming Grandma was not competent. The certified letter warning me away from the rehearsal dinner. Lyndon and Rose pickup receipt. The trust inventory. The family acknowledgment. The consignment release signed as owner. Nurse Carol's competency statement. Grandma's video. Aunt Ruth's group chat screenshot where my family openly counted on me being too afraid to tell Grandma. "This one matters," Alden said, tapping the screenshot. "It shows consciousness of concealment and intent to manage your silence." I looked at Brooke's laughing emojis. "It also shows I was an idiot for thinking they just misunderstood me." Alden's face softened. "No. It shows you were raised to interpret cruelty as miscommunication because that kept you attached." I looked away. The court date arrived on a gray morning that smelled like wet pavement. I wore the same navy dress from the rehearsal dinner because I refused to let my mother turn clothing into symbolism. Alden advised me to speak only if asked. Nurse Carol came on her day off. Aunt Ruth came too, pale and nervous, clutching her purse like it might save her. My father arrived with my mother and Brooke. Brooke looked smaller without bridal lighting, her hair pulled back, no ring on her finger. Trevor was not with her. That told me something had already shifted. The hearing room was not dramatic. No jury, no gallery full of gasps, just a judge in glasses, a clerk, a few benches, and the smell of paper. My father's attorney began by painting me as a lonely daughter with emotional access to a vulnerable woman. He said I visited daily. He said I had long-standing resentment toward my sister. He said the trust documents had been activated only after I learned the piano had been sold. He said family disputes should not be weaponized through legal technicalities at the end of a woman's life. I sat still while he turned my visits into suspicion, my grief into motive, my closeness to Grandma into opportunity. My hands wanted to twist together. I flattened them on my lap. Then Alden stood. He did not begin with emotion. He began with dates. "Your Honor, the trust was created 6 years ago. The family acknowledgment was signed by Frank Whitaker 5 years ago. The Steinway was removed from Eleanor Whitaker's residence on April 18 at 10:40 a.m., while Eleanor was in hospice. Frank Whitaker signed the dealer release representing himself as owner. The proceeds were deposited and substantially applied to wedding expenses. Claire Whitaker informed Eleanor after the sale, not before. The allegation of undue influence is not supported by the timeline. It is contradicted by it." The judge leaned forward. "Do we have the acknowledgment?" Alden handed it up. The room went quiet while the judge read my father's forgotten signature. Then came Nurse Carol, who testified briefly and clearly. That Grandma understood who she was, where she was, what the piano was, what the trust was, and what instructions she was giving. My father's attorney tried to suggest hospice medication could affect judgment. Carol looked at him with the calm of a nurse who had seen too many families confused dying with disappearing. "Pain medication can affect some patients," she said. "It was not affecting Mrs. Whitaker's ability to understand this matter when I evaluated her." Then Alden played Grandma's video. Seeing her face on the small screen in that hearing room nearly undid me. She sat upright, hair combed, voice thin but steady. "I am Eleanor Whitaker. I understand my son Frank sold the Steinway piano held in the Eleanor Whitaker Music Trust. I did not authorize that sale. I understand my granddaughter Claire Whitaker has been accused of upsetting me. She told me the truth after the sale occurred. I asked her to help Mr. Price recover the trust asset. If Frank says I am confused, ask him why he needed me kept uninformed. The room did not gasp. Real life rarely gives you that. But my father looked down, and for the first time since this began, he did not look angry. He looked caught. The judge denied the emergency petition. Not with dramatic condemnation, but with something better, precision. He said there was insufficient evidence that Grandma lacked capacity when she gave instructions, insufficient evidence that I had exerted undue influence, and substantial documentary evidence that the piano was a trust asset subject to dispute before the court. He declined to suspend my role as successor trustee and allowed Alden to proceed with preservation and recovery efforts. He also warned both sides against public statements that could prejudice ongoing trust administration. My father's attorney thanked the court with the tight voice of a man whose client had become a liability. My mother stood too quickly, almost dropping her purse. Brooke did not move. Aunt Ruth began crying again, silently this time. In the hallway outside, my father turned on me. "You played her video in court." His voice shook. "You made your dying grandmother perform for a judge." Before I could answer, Nurse Carol stepped between us. She was shorter than my father, but there are people whose authority comes from having cleaned up too much human mess to fear a raised voice. "No, Mr. Whitaker," she said. "Your mother made a statement because she knew you would do exactly this." My father looked at her as if nurses were not supposed to speak after leaving rooms. "This is family." Carol's face did not change. "Then act like it." She walked away before he could answer. Alden touched my elbow. "We're done here." My mother whispered as I passed, "How can you keep doing this?" I stopped. "Doing what?" "Dragging us through public shame." I looked at her. "Mom, Dad filed the emergency petition. Dad sent the email. Dad sold the piano. You keep calling consequences public shame because that sounds better than admitting what happened." She looked at me with wet, furious eyes. "You used to be kinder." That one landed. Not because it was true, but because kindness had always been the leash she used when guilt stopped working. I took a breath. No. I used to be easier to hurt. I left her there. At hospice that evening, Grandma was asleep when I arrived. Her breathing had changed, softer and farther away. I sat beside her and told her anyway. I told her the petition was denied. I told her Carol had been magnificent. I told her the judge watched her video. I told her Dad looked down. Grandma did not wake, but her hand moved slightly under mine. Maybe reflex. Maybe answer. I decided not to require proof of everything. The next 10 days were not cinematic. They were paperwork, silence, ugly messages, and the slow collapse of a wedding budget that had been built on a lie. Alden issued the formal demand to return $95,000 to the trust. My father's attorney responded by calling the demand inflammatory, premature, and emotionally motivated. Alden replied with the trust inventory, the acknowledgment, the competency statement, the pickup receipt, the court order denying suspension, and the group chat screenshot. The word inflammatory disappeared from the next letter. Linden and Rowe froze the sale pending title review. The collector, whose name I never learned, apparently had enough money to be gracious and enough legal counsel to be cautious. He agreed not to take possession while ownership remained disputed. That meant the Steinway was still in a restoration warehouse outside Philadelphia, silent but not gone. Lakeview Club separated Brooke and Trevor's account into paid, pending, and disputed categories. The $95,000 trail was not as simple as one check from the piano sale to the venue, because my father was not foolish enough to write stolen Steinway in the memo line. But he was foolish enough to deposit the proceeds into a joint account and issue large payments within 48 hours, including the floral arch, the quartet, photography upgrade, and private farewell brunch. Money, Alden told me, does not become invisible because it passes through a checking account with good stationery. Trevor's family postponed the wedding, to allow time for private family matters to be resolved. Brooke called me 14 times the day the postponement email went out. I answered none. Her voicemails moved through stages: rage, accusation, bargaining, sobbing, rage again. You couldn't let me have one beautiful thing. Trevor's parents think my family is trash now. Do you know how humiliating it is to call vendors? Grandma would hate what you did. If you give back whatever papers you think you have, Dad can fix this. That last one told me my father had not explained much to her. Or maybe he had, and Brooke still believed problems could be returned like dresses that did not fit. Grandma Eleanor died 13 days after the rehearsal dinner, at 4:18 on a Thursday morning, while rain moved softly against the hospice windows. Nurse Carol called me at 3:52 and said, "You should come now." I drove with my coat over pajamas, hair unbrushed, heart already understanding what my mind refused. When I arrived, Grandma's breathing had changed into the long, distant pattern I had heard at bedsides before. It is one thing to recognize death's rhythm in strangers. It is another to hear it in the person who taught you how to count music. I sat beside her, took her hand, and hummed the opening of the Chopin nocturne she loved, the one she said sounded like someone forgiving the night. Her eyes did not open, but her fingers moved once against mine. I told her the Steinway had not left Pennsylvania. I told her Alden was still working. I told her the court did not believe Dad. I told her the community center children were terrible at rhythm but improving. I told her I had the key. I told her I loved her. At 4:18, she exhaled and did not inhale again. No thunder. No dramatic monitor tone. Just absence entering the room quietly and taking the chair beside us. Carol stood behind me with one hand on my shoulder. I do not know how long I sat there. Eventually, Carol asked if she should call my parents. I said yes because they were her son and daughter-in-law, and truth did not require me to become cruel. My father arrived 40 minutes later with my mother. Brooke did not come. My mother cried in a way that filled the hallway before she reached the room. My father stood at the foot of the bed, gray-faced, staring at his mother's hands. For once, he did not speak first. My mother looked at me and then at Grandma. Did she say anything? She asked. I thought about all the things Grandma had said over the past weeks, all the warnings and instructions and jokes and final gifts. Yes, I said. She said enough. My mother's face tightened, but she was too tired or too watched by nurses to fight. Funeral arrangements began the same day. My father assumed he would control them. Alden corrected him gently by producing Grandma's written instructions. She wanted a small service at St. Mark's, no open casket, no lilies because they smelled like expensive apologies, and a musical memorial later when the Steinway status was resolved. My father read the page in Alden's office, jaw clenched. She wrote all of this? Yes, Alden said. Eleanor was fond of writing things down. I sat across the table with the brass key in my pocket. My mother dabbed her eyes. Brooke, who had finally appeared wearing oversized sunglasses, whispered, "This is insane," when she saw the line about no lilies. Alden looked at her. Your grandmother disliked lilies. She never told me that. I surprised myself by answering. You never asked. Brooke's mouth opened, then shut. It was a small sentence. It landed anyway. The funeral was exactly what Grandma wanted and not at all what my parents would have chosen. St. Mark's was an old stone church with bad heating and excellent acoustics. There were no lilies. The program was simple. Her photograph showed her at 40, seated at the Steinway with her head turned slightly as if listening to someone just outside the frame. My father gave a eulogy that stayed carefully away from property, trust, music, and anything that might invite interpretation. He called her strong, private, devoted to family. He did not say she was precise, funny, stubborn, or capable of legal ambush from a hospice bed. My mother cried into a handkerchief. Brooke sat with Trevor 2 pews behind her, though they did not touch. His parents did not attend. Aunt Ruth read a psalm and wept through half of it. I played nothing because Grandma had requested no piano music at the funeral unless the Steinway was present. That absence was louder than any hymn. After the service, people approached me with casseroles, condolences, and curiosity disguised as concern. "Your grandmother spoke of you often," an older man told me. "She said you had her hands." I looked down at my hands, which were not elegant like hers. They were work hands now, with short nails and dry skin from sanitizer and winter air. "Thank you," I said. Cousin Melanie hugged me too tightly and whispered, "I hope the family can heal." I stepped back. Healing requires everyone to stop hiding the wound. She blinked, amused to my sentences having edges. The full trust meeting happened the following Tuesday in Alden's office. It rained again, as if weather had become the story's only loyal background music. Present were Alden, me, my father, my mother, Brooke, Trevor, Trevor's attorney, and a court reporter Alden had arranged because he had apparently decided no family sentence should be allowed to evaporate. My father objected to the court reporter. Alden said participation was voluntary but documentation was not. My father sat. That was the meeting where the full shape of Grandma's planning emerged. The Eleanor Whitaker Music Trust contained the Steinway, a modest investment account funded by performance royalties and savings, and instructions for annual scholarships through St. Bartholomew Community Center. Upon her death, I became acting trustee, subject to standard fiduciary duties. The piano was to be recovered if possible. If recovery failed, proceeds from any claim would support the scholarship fund and purchase or maintain a suitable instrument for community use. My father listened with a face carved from resentment. Brooke looked bored until money was mentioned, then wounded when she realized none of it was hers. My mother asked whether Eleanor had left anything sentimental for Brooke. Alden handed Brooke a sealed envelope. She opened it quickly. Inside was a note in Grandma's handwriting and a small silver music note brooch Brooke had admired as a teenager. Brooke read silently. Her face reddened. "What does it say?" my mother asked. Brooke folded the note. "Nothing." She put it in her purse. Later, Aunt Ruth told me Brooke had shown it to her. The note said, "Brooke, beauty without gratitude becomes appetite. I hope you learn the difference. With love, Grandma." I was glad I did not see it that day. I might have felt too much. Alden then addressed the claim. Lyndon and Rowe was willing to unwind the sale if the trust reimbursed legitimate transport and inspection costs, but the $95,000 had to be returned or legally secured. My father's attorney proposed a payment plan over 7 years. Alden declined. "Your client converted a trust asset into wedding expenditures within days. The trust will not finance his convenience." Trevor's attorney requested written confirmation that Trevor had no knowledge of the source of funds and no obligation for repayment. Alden said knowledge remained under review but cooperation would matter. Trevor looked at Brooke then, and whatever remained between them seemed to sag under practical questions. My father finally spoke. Mother would not have wanted lawsuits between family. Alden removed his glasses. "Frank, your mother created legal documents because she expected family to become the reason lawsuits might be necessary." My mother whispered, "That is a terrible thing to say." "It is a terrible thing to make true," Alden replied. The court reporter's keys clicked softly. That sound became one of my favorite sounds in the world. The settlement took 6 weeks. Not because my father became reasonable, but because reality narrowed his options. Trevor formally ended the engagement before the second mediation session. Brooke blamed me publicly for 3 days, then deleted every Lakeview post from social media after Alden's office reminded her that public claims about disputed trust assets were not protected by bridal disappointment. The champagne wall vendor kept a non-refundable deposit. The florist pursued cancellation fees. The string quartet, to their credit, sent a polite note saying they were sorry for the family's loss and hoped the music found the right room. Lakeview Club refunded part of the disputed amount after applying contract penalties. My father liquidated a brokerage account he had once described to my mother as retirement flexibility, then took a home equity line on their own house, which revealed to my mother that their finances were not as comfortable as he had implied. That created its own war, quieter but reportedly vicious. He also let His country club membership lapse, not publicly, of course. Men like him prefer to call retreat reprioritizing. The trust received $95,000 plus partial costs and attorney fees under a settlement that included no admission of wrongdoing, because men like my father will pay money before they pay truth. Linden and Rowe released the Steinway back to the trust after transport and restoration charges were covered. The collector withdrew, graciously or wisely, and sent a note through the dealer saying he hoped the instrument would be played. I kept that note. It was the first time in months a stranger had understood the piano better than my own family. The Steinway returned to town on a Wednesday morning in June. I did not have it delivered to my townhouse. I followed Grandma's instruction. It went to St. Bartholomew Community Center, into the renovated recital room Alden helped arrange with trust funds and a donor who had once heard Grandma play in Boston. The day the movers brought it in, I stood beside the doorway holding the brass key. The piano looked smaller off the pedestal of memory and larger in every other way. It had a few new scratches from travel, and the restoration technician said it needed tuning and humidity control before serious use. I ran my fingers lightly over the fallboard. For weeks, I had imagined this moment as triumph. Instead, it felt like receiving someone's ashes in a shape that could still sing. Mr. Donnelly came by because he had heard the famous piano was arriving. So did 3 of my young students, 2 hospice volunteers, Nurse Carol, Aunt Ruth, and, to my surprise, Trevor. He stood near the back, hands in pockets. "I'm sorry," he said when I noticed him. "For what part?" He accepted the question. "For not asking more questions when the numbers didn't make sense." I nodded. "Thank you. Brooke says you destroyed her life." "Did I?" He looked at the piano. "No. I think you interrupted the version that was being staged." That was fair enough. He left before the tuner arrived. Aunt Ruth cried when she saw the Steinway, but this time she did not ask me to comfort her. She simply said, "Your grandmother would like this room." I looked around at the scuffed floors, the folding chairs, the bulletin board advertising beginner lessons and grief support, the windows facing the parking lot instead of a lake. "Yes," I said. She would. The tuner opened the piano and began testing strings. The first notes were sour from travel, but beneath them was the old warmth, bruised but present. I sat in the front row and listened while the sound found its way back into the room. My father did not attend the dedication of the Eleanor Whittaker Music Room. My mother sent a card with no return address, which was dramatic considering we lived 15 minutes apart. Inside, she wrote, "I hope you are satisfied that the piano is now public property." I placed the card in a folder labeled communications and went back to arranging chairs. Brooke did attend, though not by choice exactly. Aunt Ruth brought her, or perhaps guilt did. She arrived late, wearing sunglasses indoors, and stood near the back wall with her arms crossed. The dedication was simple. No ribbon cutting. No lilies. Alden spoke briefly about Grandma's belief that music belonged wherever people were brave enough to begin badly. Nurse Carol read a note from hospice staff about the evenings Grandma had asked me to hum. Mr. Donnelly played the first 8 measures of Moon River, with only 2 mistakes, then stood up and bowed so seriously that everyone laughed and cried at once. I played last. Not a concert piece. Not Chopin. I played the first exercise Grandma had taught me when I was 7, 5 fingers up, 5 fingers down, C to G and back again. Then I played it as a variation, then another, letting the childish pattern grow into something fuller. Grandma used to say every complicated thing begins as a simple thing repeated honestly. As I played, I saw Brooke remove her sunglasses. She was crying, but quietly, almost angrily. Afterward, while people ate cookies from paper plates, she approached the piano. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I didn't know she had a scholarship fund," Brooke said. "I didn't either. I thought she just liked hearing you play." I almost said, "She did." I almost softened the moment for both of us. Instead, I said, "She liked seeing people cared for." Brooke touched the edge of the piano, then pulled her hand back as if it might accuse her. Trevor isn't coming back. I'm sorry. She looked at me sharply, searching for satisfaction. She did not find it, because I did not feel any. Dad says you turned everyone against us. Dad sold the piano. You always come back to that. Because that is what happened. Her face crumpled then, not beautifully, not theatrically. Just a tired woman whose favorite mirror had finally cracked. I don't know how to be in a family where things aren't given to me first, she whispered. It was the most honest sentence I had ever heard from my sister. The old Claire might have hugged her, desperate to reward any opening with immediate forgiveness. Instead, I said, then learn slowly. Somewhere else. Without taking anything. She nodded once, as if that was both cruel and fair. Then she left. Aunt Ruth watched her go and started toward me, probably to interpret, excuse, or soften. I shook my head. She stopped. That small act, someone stopping because I indicated no, felt like its own inheritance. Months passed, and the world did what the world does after family explosions. It kept asking for groceries, oil changes, lesson plans, dentist appointments, and passwords. The trust work became part of my routine. I learned words I had once found intimidating: fiduciary, disbursement, restricted fund, annual accounting. Alden taught me with the patience of a man who believed competence was mostly exposure plus respect. The first scholarships went to 4 students, a 10-year-old whose mother worked nights at the hospital, a 13-year-old boy who wanted to play jazz but had only watched YouTube videos on a cracked tablet, a retired bus driver who insisted adults should be eligible because dreams don't expire, and Mr. Donnelly, who refused scholarship money until I told him Grandma would haunt him for pride. Every Thursday evening, after hospice volunteering, I returned to the community center and checked the humidity monitor near the Steinway. Sometimes I played for an empty room. Sometimes I unlocked the fallboard with the brass key just to hear the small click. My relationship with my parents settled into a silence that no longer felt like punishment. My mother sent holiday cards signed Love, Mom, and Dad, as if signatures could bridge facts. I did not respond at first. Then, at Christmas, I sent one card back with 3 sentences: I hope you are well. The music room is being used every week. I am not ready for personal contact. It was the first boundary I had ever written without explaining how sad I was to need it. My father never apologized. The closest he came was a message through Aunt Ruth: your father says he did what he thought was best for the family. I told her, then he should think about why the family he meant never included Grandma or me. She did not argue. Brooke moved into a condo across town and began working for a nonprofit event planner, which sounded like reinvention or punishment depending on who described it. We did not become close. This is not one of those stories where betrayal melts into Sunday dinners because enough time has passed. But once, 6 months after the dedication, she mailed a check to the scholarship fund. $200. In the memo line, she wrote, 4 ugly beginner sounds. I stared at it for a long time, then deposited it. Forgiveness, I was learning, was not a door you had to fling open. Sometimes it was a window left unlatched while you continued living safely inside. The last time I saw my father that year was at the county courthouse, where Alden and I filed the trust's annual accounting. Frank was coming out of the recorder's office holding a folder, looking thinner, his hair more gray than silver now. We nearly passed without speaking. Then he stopped. Claire. I turned. Public hallway. Fluorescent lights. People moving around us carrying deeds, licenses, disputes, proof. It seemed appropriate. Dad. He glanced at the folder in my hand. Still enjoying being trustee? The old tone was there, but weaker. Habit without force. I'm doing the work. He looked away. Your grandmother always did make things complicated. I felt the familiar pull to correct everything at once. She made things clear. You made them complicated. She protected what you tried to spend. But not every truth needs to be thrown at someone who has spent his life dodging. She wrote things down, I said. That helped. His jaw worked. Brooke's doing better. I'm glad. Your mother misses you. I said nothing. He looked back at me then, and for 1 second I saw the question he would not ask. Do you miss us? The answer was yes and no in equal measure. I missed the family I kept trying to earn. I did not miss the one I actually had. He shifted the folder under his arm. That piano room. People say it's nice. It is. Your grandmother would have liked that. She planned it. The sentence landed gently, but it landed. He nodded once, almost to himself. Then he said, I shouldn't have sold it before talking to her. It was not enough. It was passive, narrow, built to avoid the full shape of what he had done. But it was also the first sentence he had ever given me that placed himself near fault. I studied him, this man who had made me feel small for most of my life and now stood in a courthouse hallway unable to say the larger word. No, I said. You shouldn't have. His eyes flicked to mine. Maybe he expected more. Maybe he feared it. I gave him neither. I walked out with Alden into the cold afternoon. On the courthouse steps, Alden said, Was that difficult? Less than it used to be. He smiled. That is often what healing feels like. Not easy. Just less owned by someone else. A year after Grandma died, we held the first Eleanor Whitaker spring recital. Not a memorial. She had specifically disliked annual grief performances. A recital. Children played scales, folk songs, simplified Bach, one very brave version of The Entertainer, and Mr. Donnelly finally made it through Moon River, with only one pause, which we all pretended not to notice because dignity sometimes means letting a man have his ending. The room was packed beyond fire code if anyone had been counting, which thankfully no one was. Nurse Carol came. Alden came. Aunt Ruth came with cookies. Brooke came alone and sat in the back. My parents did not come, though my mother sent a potted plant with a card that read, Your grandmother loved music. I placed it near the window. It was true, and truth did not have to be rejected just because it arrived late. At the end of the recital, I played the Chopin nocturne I had hummed when Grandma died. The room was not a concert hall. A toddler cried during the first page. Someone's phone buzzed. A chair squeaked. The old Steinway had one bass note that still needed attention. And yet, as I played, I felt Grandma more clearly than I had in any cemetery or legal office. Not as a ghost. As continuity. Her mother's hands, her hands, mine, and the clumsy determined hands of every student who would touch those keys after me. When I finished, nobody moved for a moment. Then applause came, uneven and human. I looked toward the back. Brooke was crying again, but this time she did not leave immediately. She waited until the room thinned, then approached with an envelope. For the fund, she said. You don't have to make a speech. I took it. Thank you. She looked at the piano. Did Grandma really say beauty without gratitude becomes appetite? Yes. Brooke nodded slowly. I hated her for that. I know. I think I needed to. That was as close as we came to reconciliation that day, and it was enough. After everyone left, I stayed to close the room. I wiped fingerprints from the Steinway's fallboard, checked the humidity monitor, stacked programs, and turned off all but one lamp. The piano's black surface reflected the room in soft shapes, chairs, windows, my face, older now and somehow more mine. I unlocked and locked the fallboard once, listening to the brass key click. My parents had sold the piano because they thought it was an object. Brooke had spent the money because she thought beauty could be built on whatever people handed her. I had almost stayed silent because I thought love meant preventing pain at any cost. Grandma knew better than all of us. She knew love protects. Love records. Love tells the truth before thieves can rename it generosity. She did not leave me a piano so I could own something expensive. She left me proof that I had been seen by someone who understood value. And she left me a responsibility, to make sure the next person who felt small in a room full of louder people could sit at those keys, press one note, hear it answer, and know something beautiful was still possible. That is what my family never understood. They thought silence meant permission. They thought dying meant powerless. They thought an old piano was just wood, wire, and ivory. But every Thursday evening, when the first student arrives and the first imperfect notes rise into that ordinary room, I hear the truth Grandma protected all along. Some inheritances are not meant to be displayed. They are meant to be played.